Is there a way to dismantle Hamas and return hostages while minimizing civilian casualties? Hamas's recent terrorist attack on Israeli civilians, which killed 1,300 people, has drawn an increasing amount of international attention to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Folks all over the world are mourning and educating themselves on the context behind these events. Many of us agree that Hamas is a dangerous terrorist institution that not only continually jeopardizes the safety of Israeli citizens, but openly oppresses Palestinians as well. If Hamas remains in control of Gaza, it seems that long-term there will be even more death and destruction of civilian life, both among Israeli and Gazan citizens. However, many of us also agree that Palestinians have not been treated fairly by the Israeli government, with accusations ranging from oppression to open-air imprisonment to apartheid. Therefore, the current number of Gazan casualties being caused by the bombings and other forms of military retaliation for the recent attacks are considered by many to be an unjust humanitarian crisis and amounting to war crimes. Not only that, but many Israeli citizens themselves feel that this reaction is jeopardizing their chance of getting their captured family members returned safely from Hamas. Many have spoken up about the actions that are unjust or inhumane, but I haven't seen as many people suggesting alternatives. So my question is there a way to dismantle Hamas that minimizes civilian casualties among Gazans and increases the chances of a safe return of the hostages? What can Israelis, Palestinians, and the international community do to facilitate this? Only if Palestinians identified every members of Hamas and their supporters, and supported them no longer in any way. Hamas intends for civilians from Israel and Palestine to die from their actions. That is why they are such a terrible kind of evil. They fight out of uniform and they use human shields, knowing what will happen for it. If you were to let everyone go into Egypt from Gaza, Hamas just go with everyone else and wait, and attack again later. And Egypt knows this. They don't want Hamas terrorists in their country either. Ground invasion by an international coalition and long-term military occupation of Gaza. Pressure on the Egyptian and Israeli government to open safe corridors for evacuation. Capture-kill Hamas leadership in Qatar. Lots of civilians are still going to die, but maybe slightly less than in bomb strikes. But there's no non-military solution at this point. Is there a way to dismantle Hamas and return hostages while minimizing civilian casualties? Probably not. Not surprisingly, Hamas does not want to be dismantled, so it will resist any such attempts. Israel has little choice but to severely weaken Hamas. Otherwise it will be perceived as having lost. Hamas knows that it cannot prevail in a symmetrical military conflict, so it will use asymmetrical tactics. And that includes blending in with the civilian population. Hamas wants a violent conflict. Israel is willing to give it to them. So it shall be. Both Israel and Palestinians have a fundamentalists problem. Remove the religious fundamentalists and there can be discussions. The American and European left don't have an anti-Semitism problem. They have an anti-Israel problem. This comes from far different place than far-right anti-Semitism. No one in the media gives a shit enough to make the effort to explain it. Israel has stated that its priority are not the hostages. They don't give in blackmail. So no, there will be 1,000s of death and tens of 1,000s of mutilated in the upcoming assault. Hamas is an organic, political response to 75 years of oppression. Even if you could get rid of it, you haven't dealt with the reason it arose in the first place. If Gaza was placed under the rule of an Arabic-speaking government which was genuinely interested in using their police power to root out the members and supporters of the criminal organization, Hamas. They could theoretically succeed in dismantling Hamas. Considering Hamas methods, though, there would still be a lot of civilian casualties, but probably less than any other scenario. However, forming such a government would be nearly impossible, because of the difficulty excluding Hamas sympathizers from it. It would have to come from the Arab world. If a coalition of Saudi, the Gulf states and Egypt were to send in a relativist small special forces unit to areas that hostages are currently, they conceivably retrieve the hostages without inciting a full-scale resistance that would come from Israel putting boots on the ground in Gaza. Long-term, it would need to be Saudi and other rich Gulf states propping up the Palestinian economy and giving money to political parties that oppose Hamas to offset Iran's money to prop up Hamas. All ministers, priests, etc. of all religions need to send a unified signal to all the warmongers that implement war, destruction, and killing are remnants of pre-civil society, and we will no longer tolerate this type of behavior anywhere on Earth or off Earth. We are supposed to love one another with no exceptions. Problems must be discussed and addressed with a golden rule in mind. Lol. Israel doesn't want to get rid of Hamas. Netanyahu has been funding Hamas. He wants them in power because he does not want Palestine to become an actual functioning state. As long as they're a basket case, Israel can slowly annex their territory and nobody will care. There is no magical Hamas detector. They don't wear uniforms. If Palestinians were to turn over all of Hamas to the IDF, there could be peace. Everyone here is so hostile to Palestine. Hamas is not inherently evil. They are a creation of occupation and oppression. The obvious answer is to end the occupation, and that will give Palestinians no reason to be hostile to Jews. Instead of bombing, they could send in human soldiers only to specifically kill any Hamas and tactically try to get back some hostages. This would come at a great cost of Israeli lives. They would likely face incredible losses as they try to manually clear the tunnel systems the terrorists made. The reason why it won't happen like that is because they voted for a representative to be in power, Netanyahu, who will choose death for the Palestinians over death of his own people. Totally understandable to me, and unfortunately the Palestinian people will suffer alongside the terrorists for now. They could try negotiating with Fatah or other Palestinian voices to reach an actual peace agreement, inspired by the Northern Irish peace process, and eventually reach either a one or two-state solution. But of course they won't do that. The popular position right now seems to be that Gaza should be ethnically cleansed, its population displaced to Egypt, where due to local economic and political instability millions of refugees are not wanted anyway. Basically what Israel is doing right now. Send warnings and pray the civilians GTFO. War sucks and there is collateral damage always. But I am not going to blame Israel because Hamas is using human shields. Hamas is literally blocking the roads to prevent people from evacuating. That OP looks like another long-winded way of saying Hamas is bad. But a potentially effective measure against them is a war crime. Let them just keep doing what they do. But I'm not an apologist. See? Sorry. But we've seen too many variations of that over the last 30 years. End the blockade of Gaza. End the apartheid occupation of the West Bank. Negotiate a solution, one or two state that gives Palestinians statehood and freedom. You cannot dismantle Hamas while Palestinians live in horrific and hopeless conditions. We already learned this lesson in South Africa. End apartheid. That's the solution. You could start by evacuating every child under 14 from Gaza. That would be a decent start.